Nu drar vi igång dagens program med början i det europeiska perspektivet. Vi är stolta över att välkomna Henri Delanghe, dagens första talare. Han är biträdande chef för Organics Unit på EU-kommissionen. Och Henri ska berätta om varför EU identifierat ekologiskt jordbruk och ekologisk produktion som en av de viktigaste byggstenarna i omställningen till en hållbar matproduktion i Europa. Hello Henri, bonjour, very welcome. We are so pleased to have you here today. I have now introduced you briefly, so please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And good morning from Brussels. And I will try to share my screen with you. So, can you see the presentation?
Yes, very well.
Is this big enough for you?
Yes, very good. That's very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning again from Brussels, and I would give you a little bit the overview of the action plan for the development of organic production. And I thought it would be useful, first of all, to recapitulate a bit the policy context. So, as you may know, the Commission adopted in December 2019 the European Green Deal, which has this objective of climate neutrality by 2050. And within the context of this European Green Deal, two important strategies have been adopted last year in May 2020. And those are the farm to fork strategy and the biodiversity strategy. And both of those targets, they include, or both of these strategies include this important target of 25% of EU agricultural land under organic farming by 2030, and also a significant increase in organic aquaculture. Now, why is organic farming so important for the Commission? Why do we have this target? There's a double reason, of course, because organic farming has these immediate positive environmental, climate, biodiversity, and animal welfare effects. But also, any increase in organic farming will help us achieve the other targets in the farm to fork strategy and the biodiversity strategy, such as reducing the use of fertilizers, pesticides, and antimicrobials. Now, this 25% target is a quite important target, a quite ambitious target, because if we look at recent trends and then we extrapolate them, then we would only achieve between 15 and 18% of the agricultural land under organic farming by 2030. So this action plan is really about achieving these additional 7 to 10%, so to achieve the 25%. It's also, of course, ambitious because we know that the different member states are at very different levels when it comes to organic production. So we have to take that, of course, into account. What is important to understand is that this action plan, it doesn't come out of the blue, it doesn't stand on its own. So there is a fruitful context, there are some assets that we can build upon. And the first one is, of course, legal stability. We have the new organic legislation, which will enter into application on the 1st of January. And this will really bring this legal stability, legal predictability that is so important for conversion. Also, in support of the action plan, we are mobilizing very important financial resources. So, of course, we have the next common agricultural policy, and related to that, we have the agriculture promotion policy, for instance. But we also have, for instance, at EU level, the research and innovation framework program, Horizon Europe, that can support research and innovation actions that are relevant for organic production. We can also build on a high level of public trust in organics. we also see a rapidly increasing awareness of the organic logo. And also when preparing this action plan, we have seen that via the public stakeholder consultation, that there is a lot of support for the way we have analyzed the problems and also the actions we have proposed. But of course, there are challenges. I have already mentioned these different starting points for the different member states. And also, of course, as I've said already, consumer trust is, of course, everything in organic. So we have to remain very vigilant when it comes to the risk of fraud. Now, before walking you through the different axes and the different actions in the action plan, it would be useful just to take a step back and to look at some of the horizontal features of this action plan. So the first thing to understand is really that this action plan is demand driven. That's very important because, of course, if we want more farmers, more processors, and so on to convert to organic production, they will need to see an increasing demand for organic products. So that's why this action plan is first and foremost demand driven. But nevertheless, we have tried to be comprehensive, and this in different ways. The first one is that in addition to demand, we also address in the action plan, of course, supply and sustainability. So we really cover organic production from the three angles: demand, supply, sustainability. Also, we have addressed the action plan to the public sector at different levels. So we have the EU level, member states, but also regions and local authorities. And also very important, we have involved the complete private sector, let's say, along the value chain, starting with the farmers, processors, wholesalers, retailers, all the way down to the restaurants. So demand-driven, this action plan, comprehensive approach, but also putting a lot of emphasis on research and innovation. I've already mentioned the importance of the Research and Innovation Framework Program, Horizon Europe. And we have reserved 30% of the budget for research and innovation on agriculture, forestry, and rural areas, specifically for topics either directly or indirectly relevant for organic production. And then again, as I've said, we mobilize a number of programs at EU level, the Common Agriculture Policy, Horizon Europe, but there are also financial tools at member state level, for instance, green public procurement, that can be mobilized. We have these three axes and a whole number of actions and sub-actions. We also have built in a number of monitoring mechanisms, of course, so that we are as delivery oriented as possible. And then very important is that this action plan doesn't impose any kind of one-size-fits-all approach. So it calls very explicitly for national strategies, for strategies that are adapted to national circumstances. And there really member states have two very important tools. So on the one hand, for the next common agricultural policy, they will have to develop national strategic plans. And there they can set out their level of ambition and also the interventions which are closely related to agriculture and rural development. But then we have invited member states to either develop or update national organic action plans, which could cover all the measures that fall outside agriculture and rural development. And an example is green public procurement, for instance. So let me now quickly walk you through this, the different axes and the different actions of the action plan. So I have said that the action plan is demand driven. So that is why the first axis is really focused on that, on stimulating demand and ensuring consumer trust. And there we have, first of all, actions which are really about collecting data, but also making consumers aware of the characteristics of organic farming, of course, but also of all the benefits of organic farming, environmental, economic, social benefits. and to disseminate that knowledge via events, via information and communication measures that we finance via the Common Agriculture Policy. So that's really the first action, which is really about collecting information, disseminating information. Then a bit more proactive is what we call, of course, agriculture promotion. So we have a dedicated budget under the Common Agriculture Policy for agriculture promotion. And we will reserve an ambitious share of that budget for the promotion specifically of organic products. And this is promotion within the EU, but also in promising third country growth markets. So we have information and communication, we have promotion, and then we have identified a number of promising channels for future demand for organic products. And one of those promising channels is, of course, public canteens. And we all know that local authorities, regional authorities, any kind of public authority, they run public canteens, for instance, in kindergartens and in schools and in hospitals and in elderly homes and so on. And they can use public procurement, of course, to increase the share of organic products in the totality of the products they procure. So this is a very important possible source of demand, which we want to support. We want to make member states more aware and local authorities also aware of the modalities of green public procurement. We also invite them to set targets, and we will have dedicated events and sharing of best practices. A little bit in the same line is what is called the school scheme. So under the Common Agricultural Policy, we subsidize the distribution of milk products and fruits and vegetables. And there is a big review going on of this school scheme, which should be finalized by 2023. And also there, we will explore ways to increase the share of organic farming, of organic products. And we will combine this with educational activities also. Then I've said that this first axis is really a double axis. It is increasing demand, but also maintaining consumer trust. And so we have a whole number of actions in that field to really increase further even the fight against food fraud. And this is all about ensuring that the member states and third country control systems are robust, to intensify our collaboration with the Food Fraud Network and with Europol. Also, whenever there are risky products, we inform the member states beforehand, we give guidance on import control. And of course, very important there is to use or to develop early warning systems based on the different databases we operate. We have the Organic Farming Information System, we have the Traces database on trade, and so we can analyze those data and develop early warning systems. Very important, of course, also in the field of organic production is traceability. So if you have a final product, you should be able to trace it back all the way to the original producer, the original farmer. And so that's also something we are working on with a single database of operators, with digital signatures in traces, and also with the use of blockchain. And then I've mentioned already that this action plan takes this very comprehensive approach. And one way in which it does so is by involving the private sector, because in organics, of course, this value chain perspective is so important. So we are operating a number of platforms at EU level. One of them is, for instance, the Farm to Fork Strategies Code of Conduct for Responsible Business and Marketing Practices. And there we really sit together with the private sector and we discuss with them how we can improve the accessibility and the affordability of organic products. So that's it for the first axis. Then the second axis is really about supply. And I want to emphasize how important this is, of course, that this growth in demand and the growth in supply will move together. If we have more demand than supply, of course, prices will rise. And if we have less demand than supply, then, for instance, organic farmers will have to sell their products conventionally, which will generate lots of frustration, of course. So that's something we absolutely should avoid. So really, demand and supply should develop in a coordinated manner. And then the first important issue, of course, when we think about the supply of organic products is what I have already mentioned. This is the common agriculture policy. So there we are mobilizing substantial subsidies, of course, for organic conversion and for maintenance of organic production, but we also deliver advisory services, technical assistance, and so on. We will also set up demonstration farm networks on specific topics. We promote the exchanges of best practices, and of course, always important to remember that the organic production target is a double target. It's about land-based agriculture, but it's also about aquaculture, of course. Then still in this logic of supply, we feel that the sector would benefit from a greater availability of data. For instance, price information. What are the price differentials between organic products and conventional products? Because of course, this kind of information gives very important signals to operators in the value chain. So we would collect more data on prices, on production, on trade, publish them more regularly, and so on. So that's very important to further develop the supply chain. Also, what we think is very important is that as organic production develops, we want to make sure that organic farmers continue to secure a fair income. And that means that we want to strengthen their position in the value chain. And how will we do that? One way is to explore the possibility of joining or forming specific producer organizations so that in negotiations with processors and wholesalers, the farmers have a stronger position. And of course, the other one is to address any unfair trading practices. Also, when we talk about organic production, there is often the comment that this is a bit burdensome, especially for smaller farmers, because there is the cost, of course, of certification, and there's some administrative burden associated with that. So in the new legislation, which will enter into application next year, there is this possibility of group certification. So we also want to disseminate knowledge and to raise awareness of that possibility. Then very important also, of course, also from an environmental point of view, and also again from this perspective of securing a fair income for the farmer, is short supply chains. So of course, if organic farmers can sell straight to the consumer, there is the advantage of higher prices for the producer, lower prices for the consumer, and of course, all the environmental benefits that go together with reduced transportation. Also, another concept we will support is that of biodistricts. So this is really a kind of novel approach where you bring together organic farmers, organic producers, public authorities, and also tourism operators to develop joint initiatives. Then we see that organic farming is a very useful entry point for young farmers and female farmers and new farmers. And so it's an important tool in the fight against the depopulation of rural areas. And so we also want to issue guidance in that respect. Then still from this perspective of supply, we know that in organic livestock production, there are certain bottlenecks when it comes to feed and vitamins. So we are supporting a number of research and innovation actions in that area. We are also developing an algae initiative as a kind of alternative source of feed. So different actions in that area. And then, of course, again, for the specific window of aquaculture, also a number of research and innovation actions, and really in a comprehensive manner, identifying all the obstacles to the future growth of the sector. That brings me to the third axis of the action plan, which is about sustainability. So we know, of course, that organic farming, organic production already leads the way in terms of sustainability. But of course, we can always do better, and that will be very important. For instance, we can reduce the climate and environmental footprint of organic farming. So we will, for instance, set up a pilot network of climate positive organic holdings. Then we know that there is a lot of concern when it comes to organic farming, organic production about yields. So we also here, we will have dedicated research and innovation actions, as well as the exchanges of best practices. Then we know that in organic farming, still some contentious inputs are being used, for instance, copper. So also on those issues, we will support research and innovation actions on alternative plant protection products and so on. Then we know that organic farming already leads the way in terms of animal welfare, but nevertheless, we will explore further ways to further increase animal welfare. And then the final actions are really about a more efficient use of resources. So we know that in organic production, a lot of use is being made of plastics. So that is something we should address. So we will come with a framework on bio-based, compostable, and biodegradable plastic. And also we know that much improvement can still be made when it comes to the use of water and energy, reducing transportation, and so on. So this gives you a bit the overview. I've given you the policy context with the Green Deal, the Farm to Fork strategy, the biodiversity strategy. I've given you the horizontal features, so demand-driven but comprehensive, involving public sector, private sector, addressing supply, sustainability. Lots of emphasis on research and innovation, lots of emphasis on financial incentives. And then I have walked you through the different axes and the different actions. So I've finished my presentation here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Henri. It's for your presentation. It's very interesting to hear you address the climate crisis, the loss of biodiversity, the need of animal welfare, clean water, and healthy soils by promoting organic production. And as you said when we talked before the conference, we don't have either time to establish new labels or to confuse the consumer. I will now let my colleague Anton to ask you some questions, and then we will also let the audience ask their questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, again, thank you very much for your presentation, Henri. So in Sweden, we currently have around 20% organic farmland, and we have national goals for organic farmland. By 2030, 30% of our farmland should be organically certified. And also 60% of the food in public kitchens should come from organically certified food production. How important do you think national targets are for building a sustainable food system?
That's a very important question and a very important issue. I mean, I think from a Commission perspective, we think targets are very important. And that is why, for instance, in the action plan, we ask member states to set targets for the public procurement of organic products, but also within the context of the next common agricultural policy. I have explained that member states have to develop these national strategic plans, and we invite them to set national values for each of the targets in the Green Deal. And one of those targets, of course, is the one on organic farming. So we ask every member state to define a national target on organic farming. And of course, we are very pleased that Sweden has one, and that it's also very ambitious. Now, when we will get these national plans, and some draft plans are already coming in, of course, we will assess that target. We will look at it and ask a number of questions. And these are really the common sense questions, but the member states will have to develop in their national strategic plans a needs assessment and a SWOT analysis and an intervention logic. And so the first question, of course, is, given this needs assessment and this SWOT analysis and the intervention logic, does the national target make sense? Also, how does this target relate to recent trends? How does this target relate to recent developments in the sector? How does this target, is it credible given the overall development of the sector, for instance? So I think just to briefly recap, we welcome targets. We also invite member states to set targets, but what is very important, of course, is to set those targets in a realistic, evidence-based, credible manner. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very important questions that we need to sort of address and also discuss with both policymakers and the industry. And that's, I think, what we're going to do later today, actually. And I want to ask you a little bit. So why is this? Are we focusing so much on organics and not something else? There's a lot of talk about other forms of agriculture, such as regenerative or other systems that we could work with as well.
No, that's we have been presenting the action plan, of course, on many occasions, and that's a question we often get. And people will say, why organics and why not agroecology, or why not regenerative agriculture, or why not precision farming? Now, first of all, many of these practices we consider, first of all, to be on the road to organic farming. For instance, agroecology is very important, but we consider that to be a stepping stone on the way to organic farming. On the other hand, there are concepts like regenerative agriculture, which are quite difficult to distinguish from organic farming. And then there are practices like precision farming, which can easily be integrated into organic farming. So these are a little bit false choices. So we don't think necessarily organic farming is incompatible with all these other practices, agroecology, regenerative, precision farming, and so on. But what is very important to understand is that we are under time pressure to increase the level of sustainability of our agricultural system, of our food system. And we have a certified system right now, a system based on certification of all the operators in the value chain, which is the organic system. And that has taken a lot of time to develop. So we just do not have the time to develop an alternative system of certification. So our best option is to work with organic farming, organic production, which is already leading the way in terms of sustainability. And then, as I have tried to also indicate in the discussion of the third axis in the action plan, of course, we can always do better in terms of sustainability, but let's work with what we have, because just I told you that we will have a new legislation entering into force next year. It took years just to revise the existing legislation. So you can imagine how many years it would take to develop a completely new framework. So that is completely unfeasible given the time pressure we are under, but also we have a robust system in place. So let us work with that. Let us increase the sustainability of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and to sort of focus on what we've already invested in. And for example, in Sweden, 98% of consumers know of the Krav label, which builds upon the organic platform. So absolutely, I think that's an important point to make. We can't really build something from scratch. We should focus on what we already have and what is very valuable for us. You emphasized that it's very important to sort of involve the private sector, the whole food chain. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so that's something I also always try to emphasize, because of course, one specificity of organic production is that you need certified operators along the value chain. Now, what you want to avoid, and that's also something we will look at when we will look at these national strategic plans of the member states, is you don't want to create bottlenecks in the value chain. So you don't want a member state, for instance, to pump a lot of money in organic farming, but without thinking about processing capabilities or distribution capabilities. So you really need to have this comprehensive approach where you tackle all the elements of the value chain. And that's why it's important to have the private sector on board. And of course, another point I've tried to emphasize is you need this balanced development between the demand for organic products and the supply. And of course, in fueling the demand, so in awareness raising, in promotion, and in just putting the products on the shelf and making sure that they are available, that they are affordable, of course, you need the private sector there. So that's why it's very important to have really this complete value chain approach with farmers, processors, wholesalers, retailers, and so on. Otherwise, you will inevitably have imbalances in your supply chain, or you may end up with this nightmare scenario, so to say, which is that you have a lot of organic production, but there is no demand and people have to sell like conventional. And that's, of course, the worst case you could get. So that's why it's important to involve the whole private sector. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. I think I'm gonna ask some questions from the audience now. We have a question from an organic farmer here in Sweden. And he says that the organic action plan looks great, but how does it really relate to reality? In several countries, farming is almost seen as a problem. Houses have to be built, nature needs plates, milk production is decreasing, meat prices for the farmers are quite low, and fuel is expensive. So how does the farmer get his piece of the cake? So how do they get sort of compensated for the very valuable work that they do, I guess?
Yeah. So this is of course the key question, and that is why these national strategic plans for the next common agricultural policy, of course, are so important, because as I say, member states have two tools. They have these national strategic plans for the common agricultural policy, and then they have national organic action plans. But it is, of course, in the national strategic plans for the common agricultural policy that member states will propose how to distribute the money they have available. And that is where they can make the choices to support organic farming. So that is why I have tried to say that we expect that member states will put a national target for each of the Green Deal targets, so also for organic farming. And then we will look at whether this target is credible, yes or no. But also then we will look, of course, at all the interventions that are being proposed to achieve this target. And then we know that under the next common agricultural policy, there are two pillars in the common agricultural policy. There are the direct payments, but also, for instance, eco schemes in the first pillar, which are very suitable to support organic farming. And then in the second pillar, you can have investment support. So it's really up to the member state to develop the evidence base on organic farming. Based on that, to propose a credible national target, and then to have a commensurate, an ambitious, and consistent, comprehensive set of interventions. In the first pillar, the eco schemes; in the second pillar, investment support, advisory services, producer organizations. So the key tool, at least from the purely farming perspective, will be really the next common agricultural policy. And that's why we keep emphasizing the importance of these national strategic plans, because that is where national authorities will make strategic choices. Will they support organic farming? To what extent will they support organic farming? And that's also why we emphasize that these national strategic plans are best developed, of course, with the involvement of as broadly as possible a range of stakeholders. So there should be broad consultation on these national strategic plans because of their strategic importance, of course, for the coming years in terms of agriculture and rural development.
Thank you. We have another question here from Elvira Forsström at the Federation of Swedish Farmers. So she says, in relation to the farm to fork target for 25% organic production, what is the Commission's view on the analysis of the farm to fork strategy made by the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the Joint Research Center?
Yes, this is of course a very interesting question, but ultimately it is about there should not be an opposition between productivity and sustainability, and that's a little bit what the US is trying to say, that forget about sustainability, we first have to look at productivity. And we believe that you can have both of them, and that is why I have also emphasized, for instance, all the actions which relate to yields. So we think we urgently need sustainability, but of course we are fully aware of the importance of ensuring food security, of ensuring productivity. And that's why we have this double approach, because let's look at the issue of yields. Yields has less to do with the type of farming that you pursue than it has to do with the quality of management at farm level. And that's why in the action plan, there is a lot of emphasis on the exchange of best practices. So the first question is, let's make sure that all farmers produce at the frontier, that they have at their disposal the best possible knowledge and technique. And then more fundamentally, we have to, of course, also support research and innovation actions. But ultimately, the goal is to have this double objective of ensuring sustainability while maintaining productivity. So we don't see it as such a dichotomy or antagonism between the two priorities. We are fully aware of the need, of course, to secure productivity and food security.
Yeah, and in terms of productivity, I think it's also important to look at it from another perspective as well, in terms of a lot of food gets wasted throughout the value chain as well. And there's also a problem of overconsumption in some countries. So it's not only increasing the productivity at the farm, but also taking care of the produce that is being produced.
This is very important. Sorry if I can interrupt. There
Absolutely.
are so many variables, of course, because the picture is constantly changing. On the one hand, of course, we put a lot of emphasis on ensuring productivity for organic farming. On the other hand, as you say very correctly, we are wasting 20% of our food every year. And that is also an issue which has to be taken into account. And third, of course, is dietary change. People's diets are changing. So all of these parameters have to, of course, be taken into account when you make this assessment of organic farming, because we get a lot the accusations to say that by focusing too much on organic farming, you are threatening food security. But there are all these other parameters, of course, which also have to be taken into account.
Absolutely. I think I will finish with two questions. One that is about if the organic action plan is legally binding. Another question that I think it could be interesting to talk briefly about is, how do you foresee the implementation of the organic action plan, and how do you sort of plan to follow up on the organic action plan? Will the member states deliver, and if they don't deliver, what do we do in order to ensure that we are on track to this very ambitious goal?
Yeah. So this is a very important question, of course. Is this legally binding? And there it's a bit a nuanced story, because the action plan as such is not legally binding. And one of the key tools which we invite the member states to develop, which are these national organic action plans, are also not legally binding from an EU perspective. But where there is, of course, a legal framework is when it comes to the CAP national strategic plans, because there we have all the legislation related to the common agricultural policy. And again, we have invited member states to set a target. They will have to develop a needs assessment, SWOT analysis and intervention logic, develop this target, set out all the interventions, and of course, the Commission will assess those plans, and eventually the Commission will have to also approve those plans. So there, within the context of the Common Agricultural Policy, there is a kind of a legal framework and a legal lever towards the member states. Now, we think, again, that it makes sense to look a little bit broader than just agriculture and rural development. And so we think that logically, it makes sense to develop these national organic action plans as a complement to your national strategic plan for the Common Agricultural Policy. But we cannot impose this. But any member state who takes organic production seriously should really consider the development of this national organic action plan, so that together, these two plans give you the comprehensive set of all the things you will do in support of organic production. So that's for the first question. For the second question, of course, it is not so that we are now just presenting the plan everywhere and we have not been doing anything. So the action plan is being implemented right now. So progress has already been made on a whole number of issues. For instance, this first code of conduct of responsible business practices has already been adopted in July, and it already makes reference to organic production. Of course, we will try to strengthen that in future years. The Horizon Europe Framework Program is already running, and already the calls for proposal have been launched for a whole number of topics relevant for organic production. You may have noted that we have succeeded in declaring the 23rd of September of every year EU Organic Day. So this involved a joint declaration between the Commission and the Council and the European Parliament. So that has, from now on, as a kind of a tool to raise awareness of organic production, we will celebrate that every year. We are also working on organic awards, for instance, which will recognize excellence in the organic value chain. We are, as the national strategic plans come in, we are assessing them. We are already looking at them. So the implementation of the action plan is not something which will start next year or so. It is already running. At least for those actions which are at EU level, but we rely, of course, to an important extent on action at member state level. And again, that's why these national strategic plans for the Common Agricultural Policy and these national organic action plans are so important. Again, the example is green public procurement. That is something that will have to be done by the member states. It's such a powerful tool. And that's why I'm very pleased to see that Sweden has this target of 60%. It's a very powerful tool, but for those, for issues like green public procurement, we rely very much on the member states, of course.
Thank you very much, Henri. It is truly inspiring to learn more about the Organic Action Plan and the important work that you have been carrying out with the European Commission. I think we will keep in contact and let you know how we progress. But now I'll hand over to my colleague Charlotte.
Yes, thank you so much, Henri, for your presentation and the interesting discussion. Och tack så mycket, Anton.
Thank you.
Tiden går snabbt och det är redan dags för dagens första paus. Efter pausen så ska vi röra oss från Europa till Sverige med hjälp av Kravs rapport Den hållbara maten. Nina Halling, Kravs kommunikationschef, ska tillsammans med några experter gräva djupare i det komplicerade matvalet. Så välkommen tillbaka till en intressant diskussion efter pausen. Vi ses här igen klockan 10:30.